So now we have Carl Allchin, who's with us to talk about how visualizing what you love can help you learn more about Tableau and the thing that you love. Carl is a consultant with the Information Lab, where he consults on Tableau and Alteryx. He's an accredited Tableau trainer, as well as a Tableau social ambassador. We're super lucky to have Carl with us today. So without further ado, I'll toss it over to Carl.
Cool. Thank you, Emily. And hello, everyone. Thank you for hanging around for the last couple of hours and just kind of taking part in this amazing inaugural event. So very proud that Emily and Jen have got this up and running, because I think it's just another great thing about the Tableau community that you guys are on the call. You love it as well. So how do I follow the great content that we've had so far? Well, I thought I'd throw it back to a talk I gave a little while ago back in Seattle for the 2014 conference. And there was a packed room of a couple of hundred people who came in and saw me and another couple of the guys talk about how we use Tableau Public. But I've got a few little additions I've made since then. So for those of you who saw it, there's an extra bit of the story. And for those of you who didn't, then enjoy. So you're probably thinking, who is this guy? Emily did a great professional introduction for me, that I do work for the Information Lab, used to have 8 years of experience in the financial services industry, done a whole load of different things with data, different jobs, either being the analyst, the manager of the BI teams. Here's me reporting a load of complaints data. It's the normal thing with data in banks, but visualizing it, data exploration across massive data sets, the whole load of fun. But I finally made the jump to these guys because Tableau is a little bit of an addiction, dare I say. I recently accused Peter Jilks, Craig Bloodworth, and Andy Kriebel of fueling that addiction. And actually, no one really pushed back to say it wasn't their fault either. Because anyone who's really kind of involved with Tableau, you kind of know that addiction. You heard it a lot from Paul Benoob earlier. It's not just your regular job. You're actually doing a hell of a lot more than that. So the Information Lab is my channel to do that, as well as learning Alteryx as well. But that's the day job. I'm also a bit of a sports nut. Here's me in a park in Australia wearing a Spurs vest. You'll see a few more of those, with an Aussie rules ball semi-inserted into my face. But the whole point here is that I'm just kind of a little bit nuts for sport, that I spend so much time watching, playing, enjoying, that it's really what I'm passionate about. And what I want to go through today is that how I kind of dug into new depths of that passion, and I've used the data skills to go and dig into that. And that's pretty much why I'm here, because I do visualizations like this, and this one, and this one. And there's not many kind of times you can get me running around London just trying to measure how soon I deserve my portion of fish and chips. But I do love spending my free time doing this. And that quote from the bottom is from my girlfriend, Tony, that do I not spend enough time on Tableau at work? And the response is always no. So done. That's an argument that I can win. I don't win others. I am basketball obsessed. I used to play about 7 hours a week in Leeds, 5 hours of official training, and lots more other stuff besides. I made it to the Olympics, but only in the crowd, not quite as elite. And also my elite playing days were in the Yorkshire Basketball League, which everybody in the UK will know isn't that high. So yeah, my basketball career never really stretched that far. So I got involved in the game that I love by actually analyzing it. But the only issue is it used to be a pretty one-sided conversation, because when I talk about basketball in the UK, I kind of get asked three things. Number one, does Michael Jordan still play for the Bulls? No, he's retired. It's scary the number of people who look at me as this is a serious question if they're seeing the slide, or they actually ask me that question. Number two, why do you bother? It's a non-contact sport. It's a bit pants, isn't it? This is Kevin Love getting his teeth knocked out, which for most people in America, just you've seen his gummy smiles at the best of times. But for the UK, it's not a non-contact sport at all. I'm a big boy. I'm not that fast. It's the only advantage I ever used to have. Not cheating, but just being physical. And number three, don't you mean netball? I don't mean netball. I've only played the game for about 20 years now. We didn't really play it much at school in the UK. But my mum's kind of ferried me around the country, playing in various places, and she still calls it netball. Thanks, Mum. So I felt pretty lonely, and that was not fun. You know, I had this mad passion that I kind of would talk to anybody about, whether they wanted to listen or not. And most of my friends realised they weren't listening, but I was still talking. Until I met this guy, Peter Gilks, Tableau Zen. Does a huge amount of great work on Tableau. Was my boss that I stumbled across at Barclays. That I was in an IT change team. The career was going well, but you know, it wasn't a mad passion that I had for the job I was doing at the time. So I went and met him, and he had a Tableau demo at Barclays, and this is when we only had a few licenses. And we spent half the time talking about Tableau and data viz, and then the other half of the time talking about basketball. And that led to a job working with him and me, Lee Mooney, and Pete, just doing some crazy stuff within the bank on Tableau. But we always used to have a conversation around, that's great, we talked about basketball, we talked about football with Lee, but why are we just discussing ideas when we can actually try and prove some of it like we do with our day job? So let's use those skills. Let's go and stretch that. So for those of you who don't know, Tableau Public's just a huge big version of Tableau Server, which Jem was just speaking about. And it just allows you to, for free, it's amazing, just to use Tableau and share it with the world for whatever analysis you come up with. It's just available for the public. Best learning tool there is. So I love to think that my training is amazing, but Tableau Public, downloading, learning from them, way better. So I changed my obsession from buying Spurs vests, and I do actually have more than that now. That's really embarrassing. Into studying, analyzing, learning more about basketball. So where did I start? I started simply, just grab some data. I think Pete and I pulled it together as a data set, although it might have just been his. Apologies, Pete. And just looked at using different measures against each other and plotting every single player in the league. So every mark you're seeing on that scatter plot is a different player. And then I'm choosing what I size it by, or what's on my X and my Y axis. And anybody who knows me knows I love scatter plots. Anybody who also knows me knows I love parameters. So here's me playing around, and just for awareness, yeah, this was when version 8 first came out. You could have a floating dashboard and tree maps. So I obviously thought the right decision was to put one in, but it's there for a reason. I wanted to use the tree map to show by each statistic and skill set, you can see who is dominant within the teams, and you can also see the more dominant teams. But the scatter plot's the one that kind of got me, because I'm not a statistician. Pete had a master's in statistics, can't even say it, from Oxford. I, with my history and politics degree, definitely did not. But scatter plots allow you to understand and spot outliers and visually see something, and you know, that's kind of why we all love Tableau, data viz, making everything easier, as Dan mentioned in the first session. And so what we've got is the ability to analyze players, spot those outliers, whether you're just trying to beat your friends in your fantasy leagues, or you just want to understand more about the game that you're watching on the TV. So I spotted some outliers, started to dig in, and I do love scatter plots. Sorry, I just have to throw it in there somewhere. But I started asking a lot more questions, but most importantly, and what Tableau allows me to do, because I can. So the first question, as a Spurs fan, you know, blessed with success, which every other sports team that I kind of support doesn't have. So I'm glad the Spurs are my major passion. Why are some teams more successful over the long term than others? Because American sports, especially for guys and girls in the UK, they have this draft. I described it as sport communism in Seattle, which didn't go down great. So I've changed the term to socialism. Communism, not a great C word to use. But it makes it a lot harder to stay ahead. The worst teams get the best pick of the players coming out of college. So you'd think it'd be harder to stay ahead. So if you prosper through the draft, do you actually prosper in the league? And Bill Simmons wrote an article redrafting the last 20 years. So if you could pick those players now, how would you pick them and how would you decide? Well, the Spurs came out top. And I quizzed this from every angle I could do in Tableau to say, I'm being a bit of an idiot. Of course I'm biased. This is why I'm interested in this chart. No, genuinely the Spurs came out top. So we can quickly understand what's going on, how teams have actually improved in terms of if their players were picked now to where they picked originally. And we can analyze the story. We can dig through it more and more. So we can see the distribution of the players. Obviously, there's some picks like Blake Griffin, is sporting god, ridiculously athletic, very skilled. He's going to always be your #1 pick. But there's other players who aren't kind of athletically built like basketball players. Ish or Isaiah Thomas, amazing player, but is tiny. So nobody thought he would make it in the NBA. He was picked 60th. And actually, if you picked him now, you would kind of pick him 9th, according to the Bill Simmons article. So it shows you that some great players that you can pick up very cheaply if you look differently. And data and statistics has a massive part of that. And I'd love to get into it, but we'd also be here probably the other side of Christmas if I did. But you can also pick the players who haven't succeeded. Michael Beasley just signed for a team in China, so things haven't worked out well. And again, you can just dive in really quickly and understand Hashem Thabit, where he'll be picked now. Yeah, still a big body, still has some potential, but you wouldn't make that choice all over again. However, the guy that you might want to pick from the 2009 draft, Patty Mills, Spurs player, originally picked by Portland, but playing amazingly well now. So yeah, it's interesting just digging through this, picking it by team, and seeing how some teams just continually get it wrong. Sacramento Kings. But then there's other teams. Sorry, Tableau, I always have to put in Seattle. I know it's a sore subject. Anybody who watches the NBA and know that Seattle had their team ripped away from them unjustly will understand why. But they've drafted really well, and so has OKC, as they've developed in Oklahoma. So now I was able to look at by team, which players have done really well for each of the teams, and drill into a subject of maybe this is one of the drivers, and you can kind of see who the Spurs have picked up over time and how they're playing now. But there's one aspect I was missing. I can understand player performance over time, little bits of statistics, but I wanted to understand the game that I was actually watching. So, for example, where should Tony Parker take shots from? At the time I did this, Spurs major player, Tim Duncan, legend, obviously. But there's one analyst who does this better than anybody else. So professor or doctor, I don't know which way, Kurt Goldsberry, takes data, huge amounts, has a team working with him, but creates beautiful visualizations like this. And there was always kind of like a little itch to scratch of, why couldn't I produce this? And why couldn't I produce it in Tableau? And why couldn't I get this kind of more insight, stronger insight about the game around where should I be celebrating a Spurs play when they've created a shot, where they're more likely to see than the rest of the league, or how is it structured? So I sat at home one snowy winter morning, so it's probably about July in April, July in the UK, and I need to get some data. So I drew out a perfectly proportioned basketball chart, worked out my X and Y axis, and I sat there for 4 hours and collected 1/4's worth of data. Yeah, that is not big data. It's long data, but not big data. And the first attempt I came up with wasn't great. So we can see which player's taken which shot, whether that's successful for the 0 or the miss for the X. But it doesn't tell me a huge amount about the game. I can see this little clustering down in this corner, and I can see that Danny Green's missed a couple, Kawhi Leonard's missed a shot. But what's caused it? Great that I know that they've missed 3 shots from that corner that Spurs are famous for hitting shots from. But why not? So I went back to the data, collected some more, and collected the pass before the shot. And then we can get an idea around the flow of the game and just the passing that's led to the shot. So whether it's Boris Diaw doing a cheeky little pass into Marco Bellinelli, or Tim Duncan throwing a huge pass across to Corey Joseph for the shot. And actually I can start to see the 3 shots I noticed earlier as to why they potentially missed. They're long passes cutting across the whole court. If you're passing from this low already, it's likely that your defense is pretty well collapsed. So that's going to be a tough shot from the corner. And then I can put it in context of the game and the flow of the game. So I can actually look at where the Spurs weren't scoring and what shots they weren't scoring on. But then I can actually look at when the Spurs start to score and look at the shots that they're taking instead. So there's something more about this being stronger over the left-hand side of the court. Longer passes, lots of little spot ups, which is basically when the player runs down the court and just scores on their own volition, either off the back of a good defensive play or some free throws. But you're getting a better view into the game. And again, just Tableau just allows you to do this with a background image. It's a scatter plot. That's why I love them. But you're seeing lots of the data, and the game's coming to life a lot more than what I could analyze it. Does it look like Kurt Goldsberry's? No, but it's a different take on it. But that was just for one quarter. So why couldn't I do this for every shot, for every play, for every game of every season? Because I haven't actually extrapolated out the time, but I'm guessing Tom from the Information Lab's not going to pay me to do that as much as I'd love him to. It's not going to happen. So what can I do instead? Well, using Alteryx and my new skills with Alteryx, I was able to build a macro that took advantage of an API scraper that allowed me to tap in and pull out data about the game. So now I can run this module that does some pretty clever stuff. I'm not going to downplay all my skills, but it allows me to look at the game that I want and pull out all of the rows, the plays, the interaction, the position of every player, of every ball in a game. 2.2 million rows of data normally, coming to me in about 10 minutes. So that's pretty cool. But then you got to do something with it, right? So we're back in Tableau, and here we are. So I've now created the kind of play viewer that I can just pick any game that I want throughout the whole game. So let's go and pick a random one. Let's really test Tableau, and if I can get it to crash, it would be amazing right now. But let's go, no, let's not pick a timeout. That's ridiculous. Thiago split a jumper, why not? They're quite rare. But what we can do is we can see each of the Spurs players, grey dot, each of the Bulls players, red dot, and the orange dot. Hopefully you've understood that's the ball by now. And this is coming from the NBA API. The X and Y coordinates are there, again, using a background image that's perfectly scaled. Thank you, basketballwiki.com for that. And you can actually see the play develop. The shot clock was also my own invention. I was quite proud of that. Sadly, I had to do it in PowerPoint. I will learn properly one day. But you can actually see the play, the positioning, how the defense reacts, and you're actually really getting an insight into the game. The way the NBA collects this is amazing. It's 6 cameras in the roof, monitoring the numbers on the players' jerseys and watching how they react and actually plotting each of those points 25 times a second. And there's Thiago scoring. So, woohoo, go Spurs. But that's where I've got to. And all of this and all of these steps along the way, I've only gone further because of the communication I get on Twitter, through my blog, and everything else that just kind of keeps me on my toes, asking more questions. But the fact that I can go and develop this in Tableau is great. The fact that it's my day job and I'm learning skills at stupid o'clock at night or at the weekends, and I don't care because it's analyzing what I love, makes it even nicer. And all of a sudden, I'm having a global conversation about sports, about Spurs, about everything that I love, rather than trying to correct my mum over whether it's netball or basketball and when will she actually learn the right word. So that's me. That's what I want to say, that it's, if you use what's great for you, it's more interesting for the reader, for the viewer. So what comes next after this? I don't know, but let's find out. So you can follow me on Twitter, hit the blogs, go to the Information Lab blog, learn those techniques in Tableau, spend the time doing it. It just adds to your own passion, but it also adds to everything else as well. So I want to thank you guys very much for your time and throw it out there if there's any questions.
So, Carl, I actually have a question.
Go for it.
How long did it take you to do the that Spurs Viz?
So that one.
Yes.
It's developed over time. The Alteryx module was long. but thank you to Chris Love for some patience and some very basic questions. That was maybe a week's work, off and on. But the actual viz itself, hour and a half. So it's actually, the joy of Tableau. Once you've got the data, it's scarily easy to do the stuff. It's a moving scatter plot. We've got the image in the background, but the dots are just XY coordinates. So as soon as you're interrogating the data and you can see that it's actually related to the width of an NBA court, 54 feet, then I suddenly knew that actually this was something I could plot and play with, and it could give me what I've been looking for all of those 2 years since I've been using, well, 3 years since I've been using Tableau.
Great, thank you.
Cool.
All right, we do not have any questions in the queue at the moment. So do you have any, actually I have one other question. What viz do you have in process now?
Oh, that's tough. So you can see in the bottom left-hand corner here about the distance moved. So this is me using trigonometry, which is always dangerous. But when your kids ask you, when are you ever going to use this as an adult again? Here's how. You're going to measure basketball players moving around the court, and that's why. So I want to take this data and blow it out of the water and look at player speeds throughout the season. So look at proneness and tendencies of injuries, and whether we can look at whether players are being overused. So the Bulls had an example last year. Tom Thibodeau, who's now been sacked as the coach, was allegedly overusing their players. The Spurs are a complete opposite model. So what does that actually look like through data? And is it actually real, or is it just kind of perceived that that's what's happening just due to the way the players are reacting to the coach?
Okay, we have a really great question. And it is, well, let me just find it for a second here. Okay, so as someone who uses Tableau Public, if I really like your viz, does it benefit you most for me to like it on Facebook, share it on Twitter, +1 it on Google, or all of the above?
That's a great question.
I
My answer would be do everything. Make my ego even larger than it already is. No, don't do that. I would say whatever helps you learn. So wherever you're getting the biggest traction in the community. So if you're interacting with me or the author of the viz through Tableau Public, just actually click and download and view. That helps. Or if you're sharing knowledge and tips on Tableau or Twitter or on your own blog, then do that. I'm not in it for the view count. I'm in it for the conversation and also helping people learn. It's one of the reasons why I'm a Tableau trainer. So anything that helps you helps me. But yeah, no, it's nice to hear that some people like your work every now and then as well. I was speaking to a data journalist today, John Ben Murdoch, from the Financial Times, and he was saying that even as a professional journalist, he still gets nervous when he sends something out to the world, especially when it's taken a bit of time working on it. Be brave, take that step, because the feedback you get, if you get somebody being snarky, you get somebody being snarky. But normally you'll get a whole load of love and praise for what you're doing and some tips on how to build it and develop it further. And that is how you're going to become better at your job, and also how you're going to understand your subject more and more as well.
Great. Another question from Emma's husband, Lewis. Do other sports track their players like this? Do you know if it's possible to get that data?
So Brian Prestige of the Information Lab will say yes for football. They are doing more and more of that, which is good, and where you're seeing some of the stuff that's used in the Premier League now is average player movements. I'm guessing Lewis is actually asking about the NFL. I don't think they are at the moment, but I would love somebody to prove me wrong. So I've just started looking into the NFL API because I'd love to mimic that for this and use some of those just to actually start contrasting sports around. We hear about the 40-yard speeds in the drafts, but actually looking at a basketball court or an NFL pitch, who is actually moving the fastest in the most agile way, and actually how would those skills translate? That will all be possible if the NFL does this as well. I'm not sure that they do, but if somebody would send me some links to some things that they create, or if they've tapped into some of the data off the NFL API, that would be great.
Awesome. Well, Carl, I want to thank you so much for sharing your passion with us today. It's been really great, and I like how you started simple and then just kind of kept building on what you were doing because you just were passionate about it. So thank you again for spending time with us today.
Thank you very much. And thank you again for you and Jen putting the effort into setting this up. It's brilliant. So bring on Chuck.
All right. Yes. So we will have Chuck Hooper, who's going to talk about how you can become a part of the Tableau family. 3:30 East Coast time. So you'll have to do the math either way, which time zone you're in. And then we'll be nearing conclusion of TFF. Thanks so much, and we'll see you soon.